that have worked hard on this issue to protect us, to protect the industry, are working now at a political level to see what changes that we can get. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the strategies that we have to help protect against this. But unfortunately, it is a very real issue that we as a community need to work together to help address. These are some of the penalties for the independent contractor or employee misclassification. They are significant. The fines as high as $50,000 for an individual misclassified employee, and as high as $500,000 for repeat offenders. So again, this illustrates the risk that is out there. I think one of the things that is important to know and understand, and caveat out there, I'm not an employment lawyer. I am an accountant. I am not an employment lawyer. Repeat that several times in case you didn't hear it. But in some of the conversations I've had with employment lawyers is that this actually isn't that much of a shift in employment standards interpretation. It is a shift in the Employment Standards Act, and it is actually now formally part of the Employment Standards Act. However, when anything went to court, the onus was, in effect, always with the employer. The judges basically always looked to the employer to have proven the employee or self-employed status. So it's not that much of a change when it comes to how the courts are interpreting it, but it is now formalized. It is part of ESA, and there is also some concern that inspectors will be going out on an active inspection to try and identify independent contractors. We don't know yet whether that's going to happen. It's been a few months. I personally haven't seen any of that. If any of you have, I'd love to hear feedback from you on what you guys have seen as far as any inspections. Haven't seen that yet, but that is certainly a fear and a risk that it could happen. And ultimately, what will happen with that information when an inspector comes in and deems someone to be an employee rather than an independent contractor? Will that information be shared with CRA? And then, of course, what will be the outcomes when this is ultimately taken to court, and how will those outcomes, what will they be? And realistically, we're looking at probably years before we'll start to see these things hit the court systems. So we've got a lot of time before this issue is really put to bed, unless, of course, we get a new government in June that repeals Bill 148, which I'm not holding my breath on, but that is, I guess it is a possibility. And so hate to get political on everyone, but I do encourage you to speak out, engage with your MPPs, make sure that people are aware that this is an issue facing the independent contracting community, and why the independent contracting community is important to Canada and to Ontario, and why the Ontario government needs to be supporting this industry, not attacking it. So let's talk about minimizing risk. We'll first start with minimizing risk as it relates to personal service business, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to help minimize risk on an Employment Standards Act basis. So starting with PSB, PSC risk, again, I mentioned earlier that this isn't a new issue, and we've been in this business since the early days. And we've been championing the income tax rights of incorporated independent contractors since 1984. My father truly was a leader, a visionary, who recognized the value of this industry and was there championing the rights of independent contractors before the Big Four were doing it, which they now are. And prior to this, in the early 1980s, many accounting firms were actually turning away incorporated IT contractors, and we've been dealing with IT independent contractors longer than anyone else, because we were one of the first who believed in this and have stood up for the rights of the independent contractors. And we have a pretty darn good track record on that as well. We've got some specific proprietary tools that we use to defend that. We do our best to stay very well informed on the issue. We work with organizations like the NACCB. There's been a lot that's been going on across the country. Quebec has been a leader on this issue as well. Lots of issues on this topic. And it's important, like I say, over and over again, to work with a professional that knows and understands this issue. And I like to believe that we do. So how do you ensure you're not a PSB/PSC? As we said earlier, you can have more than 5 employees, and that guarantees you're not a personal service business. There are some organizations in Western Canada that are trying to do this sort of partnership type of formalized agreement to help, which leverages this. If you have more than 5 employees, you're not a personal service business risk. It's quite complicated and I think overkill. Like I said, we have a perfect track record at this point, and PSB/PSC, because we're winning and winning and winning and winning, is becoming less and less of an issue. But I think there's still very much issues on protecting the industry as a whole. So one of the things that I think are important when it relates to PSB/PSC, and we've been saying these are literally taken from a slide from years ago. This really hasn't changed a lot over the years as far as what we recommend independent contractors do to help protect their PSB/PSC risk. And a lot of these are going to come back when we talk about the employee versus contractor on the Employment Standards Act issue as well. But a strong and clearly worded written contract is by far the most important thing to have. It in of itself isn't going to prove the status, but it is really important to have. The work relationship contact must support the contract. And again, the thing to know and understand here is how conduct will be determined will be by a series of questions by CRA. So knowing and understanding language and literature is important. We've always encouraged people to limit the contract length and have them come up for renewal, which again comes back to risk for profit or loss. We like to see diversified client bases, although this is not a be-all and end-all. In fact, many of the cases that we go through in our 76-page proprietary document list people who have been with end clients for over a decade, and there's multiple cases, and in fact, no judge has ever deemed an independent contractor to be a PSB based on length of contract alone or how long they've been with one end client. Although it give you a higher probability for potentially being reassessed by CRA. So CRA will use it in their process for reassessment, but it won't be used by a judge in the determination of whether you really are an independent contractor or not. We also recommend using asset protection strategies, and we've got a number of strategies that we use to help mitigate risk, so that basically if you're ever reassessed, all the risk lays within the corporation, and that corporation can be folded up and tossed away. So control your work, again, comes back to contract and the control of your work. And like I said, language and literature, how we explain, whether we abide by the policies and procedures of our workplace, which would be a no-no for an independent contract, or how we have our own policies and procedures that happen to mirror those of the end client. That is really important for knowing and understanding the difference. We are big proponents of liability or errors and omissions insurance, because by definition, if you have insurance, you are insuring against a risk. So this helps to prove the risk factor. We also have always been big believers in building a professional profile. You'll hear me say over and over again, if you look and act like a business, you'll be treated like a business. So building a professional profile, websites, business cards, letterhead, social media, all of that stuff can be used either for you or against you. So you don't want to be saying on LinkedIn that you are working at an end client. You are an independent contractor, and that is what your LinkedIn profile should say. And we are also, again, going to be doing some more webinars over the course of the year on things like social media and websites and business presence, because we feel that this is such an important issue that is not being dealt with adequately enough by the independent contracting community. You guys as independent contractors need to understand the importance of business presence. And it's not hard, it's low-hanging fruit. It's really easy for you guys to, do letterhead in Word, do a business card with Vistaprint, set up a website on WordPress. This is easy, low-hanging fruit, but can be used against you if you're not doing it. We also are big believers that your name should reflect the services that you provide. Even if it's Andrew Wall Incorporated, it's much better than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Incorporated. We don't like numbered companies. We do allow our clients to use them, but we strongly discourage them, which is why also all of our incorporation packages include a name search included in the package, regardless of whether you use it or not, because we think it's so important. And then finally, hire experienced professionals to represent you. As we've said over and over again, language and literature, if you're professionals who are you could have a very knowledgeable, great accountant who's just not familiar with this issue, or you could have a great lawyer who's just not familiar with this issue. You want to have people who have been frontline on this issue and know and understand the issues around it. So now let's talk about minimizing risk when it relates to ESA, or Employment Standards Act, and some of the things that you can do here. So again, a lot of the 4 pillars that we talk about with PSB, PSC come back to interpretation on employee versus independent contractor. So we're going to have the control task. What do you do versus how you do it? The ownership of tools test, who supplies them? And again, not as critical necessarily in the IT industry, but still a factor. And again, we like to come back to your tools are the knowledge and experience. So making sure that you've gone out and you're doing extra work and certification, and you're paying for that inside the corporation, that you've got a chance for profit or loss, things like errors and omission insurance to help protect against that. Are you an integral part of the business, and the integration test? But over and above these 4 tests, which really come out of the Wiebe Door, we also look at the detailed written contract, the business presence that we talked about, and the contractor conduct. Because I think that truthfully, the ESA standards for employee versus independent contractor are more firm, and they err more on the side of the person being assessed as an employee than the case history when it comes to CRA. And it's really important to know and understand that tax and employment law, they're very different, and so the interpretations by the various courts are different, and they do tend to be, I guess, stricter, for lack of better words, in employment law. And again, we are employment lawyers. If you need help and you're dealing with an issue, we work with a number of employment lawyers that we would recommend, who are great, but make sure that you're dealing with a professional who knows and understands this issue if it ever gets to that point. So the 4 pillars of maintaining contractor status are intent, independence, business present, risk for profit or loss. I know I'm repeating myself at this point, but these are really, really important factors. Have a strongly worded contract that you've reviewed and that really points to intent. Make sure that you don't put your foot in your mouth when it comes down to independence or control, because really the way that is going to be assessed is based on the questions that CRA is going to ask you. Make sure that you have a business presence, that you have a website, that you have business cards, that you're not saying on LinkedIn that you are a project manager or a business analyst at XYZ company. You are an independent contractor, and your social media presence should say that. And then again, for risk or profit or loss, insurance is a great way to do that. And again, having the shorter contracts and the fact that you have a risk of not having that contract renewed are factors that can help maintain that contractor status. And again, what's CRA doing, or what's CA4IT or CPA4IT doing to help protect against this? And again, we're not lawyers, but we've gone through and we've put together a reasonableness assessment to help independent contractors prove their independence. It's provided to all of our CA4IT clients. It's available to all members of the NACCB. It's available for all attendees of this webinar. In fact, you will get an email shortly after this webinar with a link to the webinar. It is to the tool. It is a Google form. The information is tracked and retained. A copy of the survey goes back to the respondent, so you have that on record that you can then share that with whomever you like, whether that be and clients, staffing agencies, whatever the case might be. And of course, it's completely free of charge. We have put this together to help protect the industry, to help protect the community, and help continue with the contingent workforce, which we think is a really important part of the Canadian workforce, and we want to help protect that. In addition to this reasonableness assessment, we've got a couple other things that we do to help protect our clients. As I mentioned a few times today, we've got our proprietary 76-page response to the CRA's PSV/PSC attacks. These definitely point specifically to the court cases around PSV/PSC. As we start to see court cases around ESA, we will undeniably be developing a similar document related to ESA. We'll be working with lawyers on that to help protect our clients. And then, of course, we've got our unique audit representation protection, which we have mentioned earlier. And then I guess that's really wrapping it up for today. I also want to mention again, over and over again, work with a professional that knows and understands these issues, that educates you, that asks the right questions, and more importantly, that you can actually understand, that speaks to you in common language and can help you interpret this technical jargon into language and literature that you as an independent contractor can know and understand, and that has experience dealing with clients similar to yourself. So if you need a referral, feel free to ask us for a referral. When it comes to the legal side, of course, we are always taking on new clients, happy to work with independent contractors. And as we mentioned earlier, we do offer free initial consultations for anyone that might be interested. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions here. If you can try and use the chat panel as best you can for any questions. And if we don't have any questions, or if you just have feedback, we'd love to hear that feedback too. You can also email me personally at a.wall@ca4it.com. And Mo, you raised your hand. And let me see. Bear with me, I'm fairly new to Zoom. We switched off GoToMeeting to Zoom, so I got to figure out how to let Mo talk. I see he's got a question here. I just got to figure out how to let him. Okay, there we go. I have to promote you to a panelist, Mo. I think you can talk now, Mo. There you are. Mo, can you hear me? I think Mo had a question. He raised his hand, but he might be having some issues with the audio. Again, I encourage, try to put your questions into the chat panel, if you don't mind, and then I'll read them out loud and do my best to answer them. Let's see, we still have a number of you on the call. So if we don't get any more questions, I will just wrap her up. Again, please feel free to email me or give us a call. We are here to help you guys and help the community in any way that we can. So. Thanks, Rachel. And I think I guess we don't have any questions. So either that or we're just having technical issues getting it all sorted out. I had a few technical issues. I realized about halfway through I wasn't recording. Recorded about half of this. So we will, Diana, I was just answering that question for you. So I got about half of it recorded, which I will make available when we started talking about how we're going to deal with risk. So we'll also be doing this again next month. So I do encourage you guys to send any contractors or any other recruiters who are unable to attend to just register for our next one. We'll make sure that I record from the beginning for the next session. And again, I thank everyone for taking the time out of their schedule to join us. I know it's a busy time of year for all of us, and I hope that this actually adds some value to you guys and will help. And again, I'll be sending that link out. I'll be working with Rachel to get that link out to all attendees for the reasonableness assessment. So thanks again, everyone, for dialing in, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Bye for now. You're welcome, Monica.